building Eastern Europe's biggest wind farm in the middle of a war. As the world makes massive strides towards renewable energy, few countries have been more devoted to meeting the goal of zero emissions like the Ukraine. They hoped to phase out burning coal for energy by 2040. They also planned to reach 12% renewables by 2025, 17% by 2030, and 25% by 2035. As unlikely as it sounds, Ukraine was set to reach her goals. Since 2007, their stake in the green energy market has been steadily rising. They were on track to become one of the biggest natural hydrogen exporters in Europe. The war couldn't have come at a more terrible time for a country with the most energy-dependent economy in Europe. Worst still, most of the country's renewable energy projects happen to be in active war zones. Their biggest wind farm project yet, the Tyligulska Wind Power plant, is in Kherson, about 100 kilometers away from the front. And despite being under constant threat of gunfire and a Russian bombardment, DTEK, the owners of the project, managed to complete it. The Tyligulska Wind Farm in Kherson is the only wind farm to be constructed in a major conflict zone. The wind turbine project was originally planned by DTEK, a Ukrainian energy giant, back in 2020, and was only partially completed before February 2022 when the Russian invasion occurred. When the project broke ground in late 2021, Yevhen Moraz, the Tyligulska site manager, expected the biggest challenge his construction team would face would be the winter weather. 19 turbines were acquired from the Danish turbine manufacturer Vestas. DTEK signed an installation agreement with the Danish installation company Fairwind and expected to finish construction by sometime in 2022. Work proceeded smoothly as expected. Site roads were built, a few hard stands were completed, and 6 turbines were erected. Construction ground to a halt in February 2022 when news came of Russian troops massing on Ukraine's borders. As world leaders scrambled to avert the crisis, Western embassies sent word to nationals to vacate the country. Fairwind and Vestas contractors fled for their safety, taking their cranes and other equipment with them. On February 24, 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, attacking the nearby city of Mykolaiv and occupied land directly east of the city. The workers on the site of the Tyligulska wind farm woke up to the sound of heavy gunfire. Oleg Solovey, the director of the DTEK Tyligulska Wind Power plant, said that the war caught their team at 4 a.m. in the morning. Their first reaction was to evacuate their employees to a shelter and secure their safety. After a few early wins from the Ukrainian army, Alexandra Seleshchev, the CEO of DTEK Renewables, decided the company would continue building. According to him, Ukraine's victory in the war was not in doubt. Of course, Russia gaining control of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, Ukraine's single largest power generator, also motivated them. The plant had been damaged repeatedly by fighting and stopped transmitting energy. Most of the country's renewable energy sources were not spared either. Local solar farms and up to 90% of all renewable energy sources were either shelled, destroyed, or under occupation. In April and May, the locals returned to the site to preserve equipment to prevent damage and began to plan erecting the remaining 13 turbines without the help of special equipment or qualified foreign contractors. Despite the nationwide lack of heavy machinery, the Crane Ukraine company managed to track down one Liebherr LR1600 wheeled lattice boom crane capable of lifting the huge turbines. The crane had to be modified with specialist equipment provided by BMS Heavy Cranes, a Danish crane company. When the local team was ready to start construction, they reached out to Vestas for advice on erecting turbines in a war zone. As site manager Yevhen Moraz aptly puts it, turbine construction technology was planned for standard non-military condition. The process requires maximum concentration and maximum attention, both of which Russia was not going to give them. DTEK formed a plan of construction with the input of Vestas' security officer. It included monitoring the front line for fighting, which was just 100 kilometers away from their site. They were only a few miles from the Dead Sea, where several Russian ships patrolled. They were to ensure that the enemy was no closer than 50 kilometers away at all times, and to retreat into bomb bunkers built at the site when they heard the air raid alert. Specialists from Fairwind also agreed to return to the site despite the risks to help oversee the work. Construction officially resumed in October 2022, right around the time when Ukrainian troops started to regain control of Kherson, and the Russian troops retreated east of the Dnipro River. After acquiring the appropriate equipment and personnel, the team faced their biggest challenge yet: erecting the turbines in the middle of an open field during Russian missile bombardment while being just 60 miles away from the front line. Staff had to work wearing bullet vests, Kevlar helmets, and were trained to stop work at the sound of the air raid siren and flee towards the nearest bomb shelter. Luckily, the wind farm was never specifically targeted during construction, but they heard a total of 296 air raid alerts. Each time it sounded, the group had to climb down from the crane or turbines, slowing them down considerably. Sometimes they heard the warnings multiple times a day, which meant they could hardly get anything done. The staff calculate that they must have spent over 300 hours in those bomb shelters waiting for the warnings to pass. At some point, they started training new staff in the bomb shelters to pass the time and make sure the workers were ready when the opportunity presented itself. But between the winter weather and the warnings, construction dragged on. Moraz even reports an instance of a turbine that remained mounted, ready for liftoff, for more than 24 days in January. With mounting pressure from the local Ukrainian authorities to get the wind farm operational as quickly as possible, the team received approval from the regional military authorities to work at nights with special lighting equipment. With that single change, they were able to match their pre-war speed and assembled a turbine in 6 days. To ensure the wind farm cannot be bombed, each turbine was erected 100 feet apart from each other, requiring dozens of drone strikes to possibly eliminate them all. As Antonina Antosha, the spokeswoman of DTEK, puts it, even if one turbine is hit, the others will keep running and generating electricity. Whereas when a transformer is hit, the whole thermal power plant goes out of operation for an unpredictable period of time. DTEK opened the Tyligulska Wind Power Plant 1 year later than originally planned, with a capacity of 114 megawatts in May 2023, and it has already been put to use. It currently supplies houses around the Mykolaiv region and can support up to 220,000 households a year with its enormous power output. The governor of the region, Vitaly Kim, called the wind farm a sort of signal that it is possible to build during war. Such project has to exist for the independence of Ukraine. The station holds a strategic and symbolic significance. If the war drags on longer, Russia can sabotage and destroy Ukraine's energy system come next winter. But thankfully, the farm was designed from the ground up to resist air raids and guerrilla tactics. The success of the farm is also a way of signaling foreign investors and other European countries that Ukraine is fertile for investment post-war and are well on track to becoming a green energy giant in Europe. Predictably, DTEK has benefited the most from the success of the Tyligulska wind farm. DTEK is owned by Ukrainian oligarch Rinat Akhmatov, and the completion of Phase 1 of their megaproject has given them the attention and political clout to push for the Ukraine to build 30 gigawatts of clean energy by 2030. The company estimates that half of the power generated can be exported and sold to other European countries. Their hope is to gradually phase out Ukraine's aging coal infrastructure for green renewable energy. Keeping with their long-term goals, the company has also expressed plans to move on to Phase 2 of the wind farm sometime in the future. 64 more turbines will be added to the 19 existing ones and will cost about $430 million, but will produce about 400 megawatts more. Despite near-impossible odds and being under constant threat of bombing, DTEK managed to complete the Tyligulska wind farm. It is an absolute triumph of engineering, ingenuity, and the people of Ukraine. It's clear to all paying attention that Ukraine is poised for explosive growth post-war. With yet another green energy project completed and DTEK gearing up for an expansion, do you think the company will reach its goal of 30 gigawatts before 2030? Tell us what you think in the comments section and subscribe for videos on interesting topics like these.